The $50 million they invested ended up returning almost $7 billion.
And I saw the name of Carl Icahn. Is it that true?
It's true.
Okay.
Oracle at the time they paid up $9 billion.
Lui è Alfred Chuang, ha visto nascere Internet ed è stato uno dei primi assunti in Sun Microsystems, una delle prime più storiche aziende della Silicon Valley. Da là ha fondato la propria azienda e l'ha venduta a Oracle per $9 miliardi. Tra l'altro costretto da Carl Icahn, il leggendario investitore. Dopodiché ha fondato il suo venture capital Race Capital, che si trova proprio nel cuore della Silicon Valley. Così, durante il mio soggiorno, l'ho sentito e l'ho convinto a fare un'intervista con me, dove mi ha raccontato tutta la sua storia assurda e il suo parere sul futuro delle tecnologie.
I was born and mostly as a child, I was raised in Hong Kong. I came actually to North America, Canada first for schooling, and then I came here for university. And then after university, I went to graduate school. This is at UC Davis. And I studied the whole time studying computer science, but very theoretical things, mostly on database technology. And then through really totally a serendipity situation, I ended up went to work for a company called Sun Microsystems, which is a very famous company at the time.
When did you came up there?
Oh, very early stage. The Sun was privately held, a few hundred people when I joined them. The whole company was in 2 buildings. All the famous people, Bill Joy, Vinod Khosla was CEO, Scott McNeely, Andy Backdolsham, and Eric Schmidt, was employee and director of engineering. Carol Bartz, who was my boss at one point, she was running customer service. So all these famous people were in this company.
History of Silicon Valley, you could
History of Silicon Valley. It was a historical Silicon Valley company. I went to work for them. I was actually there for a very long time, 8.5 years. Through a very serendipity process, Sun is a very interesting company.
What were you doing there?
I did almost just about anything. So I was doing technology development, worked on databases, worked on operating systems, worked on windowing systems, and then I was in the field. I have worked for them at one point in Japan, an international group. I have worked in IT. I transformed Sun's own operations that used to run on an HP. I know, it was very bad. And then at the end, towards the end when I was leaving, I was actually working on a project to transform Sun from a desktop company to a server company. That was a very, very interesting process because it became the world that we get to know today with the cloud. That's how Unix proliferated.
Unix era il sistema operativo con cui al tempo ci si interfacciava con i server. Sun Microsystems nasce come azienda che fa computer, hardware, cose fisiche, computer veri e propri, però sviluppava anche software per interfacciarsi con queste macchine. Gradualmente negli anni la Silicon Valley è diventata sempre meno hardware e sempre più software. E questo cambiamento Alfred Chuang lo stava intercettando, aiutando Sun Microsystems a diventare da un'azienda desktop a un'azienda di server. E proprio in questo processo Alfred Chuang fa la scoperta più importante della propria carriera.
I discovered at the time the stack with the Unix computer, large server, along with all of our operating system and then running a database system were insufficient because the customers are basically moving from the mainframe, having very large computational models running in batch form, so everything runs in a sequence, to now they're running everything in real time in a real-time access database.
Ok, a meno che non siate degli esperti o dei veterani, questo pezzo ve lo devo spiegare. Se per voi adesso è normale che tutto quello che fate su internet avviene da qualche parte nell'etere, al tempo questa cosa era inimmaginabile. Se per esempio volevo fare un sito web, dovevo avere fisicamente il server per ospitarlo. Adesso invece è tutto in cloud ed è anche tutto in mano a poche aziende come Microsoft, Amazon e Google. Quindi quello che pensiamo essere etere in realtà sono fisicamente dei server da qualche parte in Silicon Valley di proprietà di Google, di Amazon e di queste altre aziende. Questo si chiama cloud computing, quindi tutto il potere computazionale che serve per fare le nostre cose avviene appunto in cloud, cioè nel computer di qualcun altro. Quello che invece avveniva negli anni 90 era completamente differente. Tutte le operazioni del proprio computer al tempo venivano eseguite in un server chiamato mainframe e venivano eseguite tutte da un grosso computerone, una dopo l'altra, in gergo in batch. Questo significava che se avevo 1000 richieste o dovevo fare 1000 operazioni, non potevo farle tutte in contemporanea, ma solamente una dopo l'altra. E alcune volte queste cose impiegavano ore o giorni. Così a un certo punto Alfred si rende conto che se si vogliono fare le cose in tempo reale, si deve utilizzare il distributed computing, cioè si deve distribuire la potenza di calcolo su più server, in modo da fare più operazioni in contemporanea. Al tempo però era impossibile perché un solo sistema operativo di una sola macchina non poteva comunicare con più server diversi. Ed è così che lui si inventa la soluzione.
So in Makeshift, I invented a piece of software I didn't know I was doing to allow both the compute and also the storage to be distributed on multiple machines. I didn't know what it was called, and later on I coined it with a name called Middleware because it's in between the operating system and the database.
Così in questo modo Alfred Chuang si è inventato il middleware, cioè quel pezzo di codice che serve a far comunicare il sistema operativo con i server. Per questo è in mezzo e quindi middleware. In questo modo, a differenza di prima, le operazioni non avvengono più in batch, una dopo l'altra, ma possono avvenire in contemporanea in maniera distribuita su più macchine. Questa è proprio la base del distributed computing. computing, che poi porterà al concetto di cloud, che vi ho detto prima.
So when I went back to Sun and say, we have to be in this business. This is where the money really is. This could be bigger than a database company. Sun, as a hardware company, decided they didn't want to be in the business. So I said, I'm going to go do it. So they were very supportive of that process and say, if it doesn't work out, just come back anytime. If you need anything, let us know you need some computer, you need some money.
So they didn't get angry?
No, Sun is not that kind of company. That's why Sun has so many people that ended up running huge companies or founded new companies. It's because they are very supportive. They know where they come from. So they want to do the same thing to help the entrepreneurs. So I ended up with that, started BEA Systems.
Quindi una volta scoperto il middleware, Alfred Chuang cerca di convincere Sun Microsystems ad investire su questo progetto. Loro però declinano perché sono ancora focalizzati sull'hardware. Così Alfred, con altri 2 colleghi di Sun, decide di fondare BEA, che non sono altro che le iniziali dei 3 fondatori. BEA si concentrerà proprio sul middleware, aiutando tutte le aziende a distribuire i propri server tramite questo software. E comunque Alfred non rompe i rapporti con Sun Microsystems. Infatti, storicamente da quell'azienda sono uscite un sacco di altre aziende miliardarie, tra cui la più famosa è Nvidia, di cui 2 cofondatori sono proprio usciti da Sun. E tra l'altro non solo aziende, ma anche un sacco di CEO sono usciti da là, come per esempio Eric Schmidt, il vecchio CEO di Google, Satya, il CEO di Microsoft, anche il CEO di Autodesk o il CEO di Motorola. E molte di queste aziende, compresa la BEA, attingevano il personale proprio da Sun Microsystems.
We were all the employees from Sun, so that we originally recruited a lot of people from Sun until they told us to stop. Almost everybody's from Sun. And then we went into this business to kind of allow large-scale applications to be built. So our first customer were telephone companies because you have billing, you're provisioning. And back in those days, we were just transitioning to selling a lot of mobile phones. So a typical motion would be you walk into a store to buy a mobile phone and then they'll activate you. Immediately, when you walk out, the phone is working. So they need real-time technology in the store to activate. You can't wait all night for the mainframe to activate it. So this actually makes perfect sense. And the other thing, as soon as you activate the phone, your bill is running. So they need billing also to be in real time. So those 2 pieces cemented our position in the marketplace. And then obviously, once this got discovered, the bank, the pharmaceuticals, the transportation companies, the airlines.
And that was the middleware?
That was middleware. Yeah, our first product is a product called Tuxedo. So all it does is distribute out compute and storage onto multiple machines.
How does it make it faster?
Because now you can actually have the data to sit locally. Okay. So in the beginning, it was all sitting in one server farm. Once this happened, it worked, and then internet speed started to increase. So we started to distribute out to become wide area network based. This is the incarnation of the cloud. So now we can run it anywhere and have the data and the compute very close to the user. And only when you need global data, you go fetch. So that's become the model of what we have today, to this day.
L'esempio che mi ha fatto Alfred è perfetto. Quando vai in un negozio di telefoni ti devi far attivare subito la SIM. Non puoi quindi aspettare tutta la notte che un server in batch esegua tutte le operazioni, che sono migliaia o centinaia di migliaia. Per farlo in tempo reale, quindi il negozio deve per forza fare distributed computing. E servizi come quelli di BEA sono diventati fondamentali per tutta la telefonia. E poi una volta che internet è diventato più popolare, anche per tutte le banche che volevano iniziare a fare operazioni online. Infatti i bonifici devono avvenire subito. O ancora più importante, il trading online e le operazioni finanziarie devono avvenire in tempi brevi.
We have every telephone company in the world. In the farthest and the oddest place, they were all our customers because there's really no other way to do this. We became the lead player in this. And then once we got that done, banking became our second, actually eventually became our largest sector because banking became real time. Whether it is for personal or private banking, all the way to wholesale banking, fixed asset management, everything else become real time.
Then it leads to trading and
the trading.
It should be real time.
Exactly. And then eventually internet happened. So we were the backbone for companies like Charles Schwab, E-Trade, Merrill Lynch, all the big retail trading house, enabling the customer to trade over the internet. Those are all through our technology.
Did you raise any capital when you wanted to create the company?
We did. Our fundraise was a unique one because back then this idea was so far-fetched that you tell someone in 20 years the world's going to work from a mainframe into now no more mainframe to be now we just have a bunch of server farms sitting in the ether. Anybody can get access to it and instantaneously they can start writing code and deploy. It's something that people cannot imagine. So we were very lucky. We ended up meeting a guy called Bill Janeway. So Bill Janeway was a VC. He's based in New York. So he ran all the technology investment at Warburg Pincus, which is a very old firm. Normally they invest in much later stage, but during that era in the late 90s, they just mid to late 90s, they were very interested, him in particular, to build a practice to invest in basically groundbreaking technology for this transition. So this is very thesis driven, was to kill the mainframe. So we were very aligned. We met him. He was very interested to fund the company. Ended up, we wrote a business plan that he funded, and then they funded us and committed to us $50 million, which is a very large sum. Oh, this is 1994. So it's a very big sum of money. And what they want is they want to own a big chunk. And so this kind of freed us to go pursue the business itself.
They got a big chunk of the company?
They got a very big chunk. So I just want to give you an idea. The $50 million they invested ended up returning to their limited partner almost $7 billion. This deal worked out very well. It was actually the highest return venture capital deal for 20 years, even bigger than Google.
A huge chunk of the company.
Of course. And they deserved it because they were willing to back us a lot of money.
How did you use those money to scale?
Once we got the money, we went off to obviously start implementing the technology. Now, the problem with any new technology, and look at all the startups that we have now, I'm now in the business of funding these technology companies. It just takes a long time because you think about the development, finding your proof of concept, and expand and hire people to sell, because enterprise software, you need to sell them. You need to help the customer. So because we have the capital, we started to think out of the box and say, is there any way to cheat, any way to actually cut this process short? We ended up acquiring a distribution channel that was selling this kind of product. This allowed us to have a company we first bought in Paris, France, because they know how to do this, and they have like 30, 40 people. So now we're in Europe. And most people won't start with France, but they have very smart engineers. So that's where we started back in the 90s. We bought a company here in Silicon Valley. We bought a company in the East Coast. With those three acquisitions, this company all of a sudden had almost 150 people.
You were using money to scale faster by M&A.
By M&A through acquiring channels. So now everybody does it. Our good friends at Bending Spoon is using this exact playbook to get there faster. We get into a market, activate, reformat the technology, precisely what we did. That allows us to get ourselves up on the ground.
Quindi, per scalare il più in fretta possibile l'attività, hanno speso i loro 50 milioni per acquisire altre aziende. Infatti, assumere da zero centinaia di persone e trovare tanti clienti è molto difficile. Invece, con una strategia di M&A, sono riusciti ad andare velocissimi. Infatti, in solo 3 anni si sono quotati in borsa.
BEA went public in 3 years with $100 million revenue. Then it allowed us to basically raise capital in the public marketplace.
You went public at the Nasdaq, right?
Yes, Nasdaq.
How is the process? I mean, it's a unique thing.
The market was very different. The 90s leading up to the dot-com bubble, the public market was very receptive into small cap technology stock. I have companies that we've invested in is closing in $2 billion in revenue and still held privately because now it's so hard to do. The compliance process is so difficult. Back then, actually, it was much easier. Actually, our timing wasn't terrific when we went public.
How long did you...
It took us probably 3-4 quarters, which is now nothing. Now people, it takes 10 years. The market was so turbulent. We have considered, even after we went on the roadshow, of pulling the plug on the whole IPO because the market was so bad. But I think, obviously, in retrospect, we clearly made the right decision. Once we went public, people are discounting the value of being a public company to have yourself reporting so structurally. So your customer gain confidence to know when they buy from you, this is a real thing. The value is very high.
What percentage of the company went actually public?
Only about 10-15% at the time. Okay. Very little was floating,
How much capital did you manage to raise thanks to that?
When we first went public, we only raised $50 million.
Were you then concerned about the stock price? Because your own stock, how does it work emotionally?
Tech especially software, is a very interesting business. Long-term business. I know this is the part that throws people off in business because everybody study and say, well, who are the wealthiest people in the world? Elon Musk is Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates is all tech guys, okay? So people are mesmerized. They say, wow, something with software have generate very high margin, hence generate a lot of cash. So they have very, very high beta. Now even hardware business, look at, Jensen with NVIDIA, they can reach $3-4 trillion in market cap. People believe that, but they forgot sometimes it takes 20-30 years to get there. So they love the story. So unlike anything else, this is a very, very long game. Anyone who take a company public, you can't think about the stock price because it's going to drive you crazy. What it goes up to today, next week, next month, it's almost irrelevant if you look into it for 10 years. We only hear about a story that people sold out the Apple stock too early. They sold out NVIDIA too early. They didn't wait this time. Anyone that happens to be running these companies, you must ignore what the stock price is. Just run the business.
What was your role?
I did many roles when I was doing BEA. I started to be the head of engineering and CTO because you have to first write the code and build a product first, right?
Technology.
And then after that, one of my co-founders retired. He decided to do a very interesting thing. He said, Alfred, you should run sales. If you were able to conquer this and be able to write the code and sell the code, you're special. I looked at it, I said, well, it's very hard for a software engineer to go sell. Because sell, you stick your hand out and you ask for something. A 50-50 chance you'll be rejected. Introverted engineers is not designed to be rejected. But if you're able to cross that barrier, it becomes very powerful. So I think now it's a much more common thing for engineers to know. Once you take on the CEO role, you become the chief salesman. I took on that. I learned a lot. I learned how to create quota for the sales team. I know how to actually the construction of the sales team work. I try to understand the psychology of a salesperson, which is dramatically different than an engineer. Why, to them, the comp plan motivates them. It's beyond the money. It's what they live on. So once you understand the psychological component of this, it's a very satisfying thing because this is much shorter term. Every quarter you see the results. And you're trying to understand how your product, all the way to the hands of the customer, how you can optimize and how you will sell and package differently. So now it fulfilled the change. That's kind of what I did. And then soon after that, I became CEO of the company. So I was CEO for majority of the time. I had a very good time. I learned so much. There's no CEO school. Everything you have to learn from scratch. It's not an easy thing, but the challenge is so different every morning when you wake up. It's a very addictive process.
If you can say what are the most important things to be a great CEO?
Number one is this business, we don't have any machines other than a computer. We're in a people's business. So if you don't assemble the best of the best people, you're just not going to win. Hiring. If you don't think hiring is the number one of the number one priority that you have, you won't be successful as a CEO. And it's never ending, by the way, because you will have people that I tell the story all the time. They make too much money. They retire early. What do? You're going to have to replace them. Some people, they can't scale the business, so you will have to replace them. The business itself is expanding. I remember there was one year when the dot-com bubble was on full-fledged. Our company went from 250 people to 4,000 in 1 year. In 6 quarters, we grew that much. So when you grow through that kind of growth, you're going to make a lot of mistakes.
How do you hire?
You basically is all gun blazing. Now, obviously, have a hot company. It helps you to recruit for the people that will be interested in you. But then you first have to hire the best recruiter. You don't have the machine to recruit. No one is going to come in. So that's very crucial. And how do you put together the compensation to ellipse other people so that they want to come work for you? How do you get them excited about business? And you tell them, I mean, like, who would have been in NVIDIA 30 years ago and say, this will become a $3 trillion company? No one will believe you. That is the job of the CEO to convince the people that will be the case. Those kind of things are super crucial. At some time, the company will also transition from just a growth company, very typical of software, into a profit company, into a cash generating machine. We always say cash flow generation is shareholder happiness because then it's a real business.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Right.
Did you arrive at that point?
We totally did. When the company was sold in 2008, our revenue was just about $1.7 billion a year. We generated over $400 million free cash flow. Basically, we were generating close to $2 million a day in that cash. Is a business humming, is working.
Quindi BEA era nel posto giusto nel momento giusto. Erano gli anni in cui internet diventava grande a dismisura in maniera esponenziale e loro erano pronti a lavorare con tutte le aziende che iniziavano a lavorare sul web.
4 years after the company was founded, we pivoted the company to went straightly into the internet. There were a lot of doubters in 1998. Internet would become the backbone for all business transactions.
Now it's crazy to think, but yes.
I know. There were very large pharmaceutical companies, even telcos that say, well, we'll never be on the internet. I know you look back and you say, well, how dumb was that, okay? Just like how we think of AI today. People say, oh, we'll never be using AI. That would not be a smart thing to think about. We actually pivoted the entire company and recreated a technology called the Web Application Server to do the distributed transaction processing, to replacing our core product, which is called Tuxedo. Our new product is called WebLogic. The WebLogic Application Server is still used in just about every e-commerce site. At times, I would still see error. You know, when I check in the airline, I say, oh, these are our error. So it's still alive and kicking for all the old applications. Now, in new ways, people have reinvented way to do this, obviously with programming paradigms and stuff. But back then, everything, I mean, even a lot of the code today is written on Java. So we were the biggest distributor of Java, actually. Bigger than Sun was, because Sun was only distributing on their machine. Everything outside of Sun, we were distributing the Java's virtual machine.
So you were distributing Java through the internet?
Oh, yeah. That transition was monumental. We needed to do it because I believed in it. I believed that the internet was going to be the media of how people would do everything. First, we were reading, then we have to be writing. So how do we actually be able to transact on the internet? Now you look back, like you probably got here on an Uber, that's transacted on the internet. You put in some information, car showed up, you get in the car, you get charged. It's amazing. You buy a ticket to fly from Italy to here. You look back, it looks obvious. In the beginning, it wasn't. Our job was to convince the world this was going to be the case. This one worked out very well.
It was a nice boat to be in.
Right.
Quindi durante gli anni della bolla delle .com, Alfred ha visto la sua azienda decuplicare di dimensione e anche ha visto decuplicare il suo patrimonio. Poi però, come sappiamo, la bolla è scoppiata.
So when the internet bubble bursted, and by the way, AI has a bubble, eventually it will burst, because in tech, we generally invest way too much upfront. And then you see which one worked out, and we're okay with that, right? Because we can't wait. The only way it can happen fast is you overinvest.
It's fast and inefficient, but let's do it fast.
Exactly, do it fast. Fast, speed trumps everything. You walked in here and say, well, why is this place called Race Capital? Because I believe if you don't move fast, you have no chance.
Almost the concept of blitz scaling.
It is. It really is. So moving fast, but then at the end, you have to create a real business. So obviously, some of our customers disappear because our ISVs, people that built on top of our platform, they were building applications. Some of them, they didn't work out because the business wasn't solid enough. When you all of a sudden you lose capital, right? The capital market shrunk, which is then the stock market crashed. It's very difficult to survive. The real ones, they survive and continue to prosper. We lose some customer, but our enterprise customer then really proceeded to implement on the internet. So our business thrived and it actually not only survived, it actually did very, very well after that.
Quindi, nonostante lo scoppio della bolla.com, BEA non solo non ha fallito, ma è cresciuto ancora di più. Infatti, generalmente, durante queste bolle, a saltare in aria non sono le tecnologie fondanti, ma sono i progetti inutili che non sono innovativi. BEA era una tecnologia fondante, fondamentale per le aziende per stare sul web. Piuttosto, molti progetti, magari basati sulla tecnologia di BEA, potevano essere inutili e infatti sono falliti alcuni, indebolendo momentaneamente la posizione di BEA. Per capirci, in questo momento il grosso delle aziende che fanno intelligenza artificiale in realtà non hanno nessuna vera tecnologia proprietaria e sono costruiti sopra modelli di ChatGPT, di Microsoft, di Google, di Anthropic. E quindi se e quando scoppierà la bolla dell'AI, i primi progetti a saltare saranno proprio loro e non invece le aziende che hanno effettivamente tecnologie fondanti come OpenAI. Quindi ora sappiamo che BEA ha continuato a crescere di brutto anche dopo la crisi, però immagino che Alfred se la sia vista vista brutta quando ha visto che il grosso del suo patrimonio andava in fumo in pochissimo tempo.
During the free fall, were you scared?
Personally, I wasn't. First, because I'm just looking at our massive customer count. BEA was a company that in a 15 years history had racked up over 100,000 enterprise customers. It's Fortune 100, Fortune 1000, Fortune 2000, Fortune 3000. Anybody who's really in business were using this technology. This is so highly proliferated. Certainly wasn't fearful that this is going to be an issue. Did it scare the other people? Sure. Now, obviously, when you have a stock price that plummeted, because the world has plummeted.
How much did your stock price?
Oh, I would say probably at the peak point it would drop 60%, 65%.
All right, not as bad as other companies.
No, well, no, it didn't drop 90%, but because of the whole overall market drop, they were not putting that kind of growth multiple on the stock anymore. It is just what it was. Your recruiting become more challenging because now comparing to a brand new company, that your prospect is unlimited. Now you have an existing company, you see the jitter in the stock itself. But that was a short-term thing, and we were able to battle through that. The company to continue to grow headcount, no problem. It just became a very large, solid company.
The company was thriving, but then you sold it.
Yeah.
How so? And I was researching on Wikipedia, and I saw the name of Carl Icahn. Is it that true?
It's true. It's true.
Okay.
So what happened was, and this would make perfect sense. You know, Larry Ellison, he runs Oracle. Larry's one of the smartest entrepreneur ever in software. Genuinely, I have huge respect for him. And he has always been interested in our business. This would make sense to you. Why people want to acquire the business? Number one, the smartest people to acquire is because it's channel synergistic. That means they are selling to a set of customer, already have a sales force in place. What can you give them that you can increase your ACV? And that will be almost all profit at that point. The other thing is adding that will allow you to free up competitive ground that you're losing to your competitor because they may have an advantage over some other product that's surrounding their core product.
And that was the whole strategy of Oracle.
That's exactly the whole strategy of Oracle. BEA was a very successful acquisition. Obviously, there was no reason for me to sell them the company because we're generating so much cash. We're growing 20%. Why do I sell them the company? I always ask me and say, well, what do you think is likely result if BEA is still around today? I said, well, if you just look at the numbers, we had over 100,000 customers. And we were in the similar class of company as Adobe, Intuit, that class of company. We were actually much bigger in market cap than NVIDIA at the time. If you would just do the math and we continue to evolve the technology, that install base will likely survive. Today probably is a $50, $100 billion company. I mean, life, there are many things can happen to you. You have to kind of adjust yourself to the situation. So what happened to us was in 2005, 2006, there were a long series of every single large tech company were going through a stock option investigation. If anybody had backdated the dates on the stock option strike dates, we were like everybody else. Our investigation went on for 6 quarters. So 6 quarters, we couldn't report earnings. At the end, we were completely cleared. We didn't do anything wrong, but our stock was very depressed. So Oracle is a good time to buy. They did the process, and it went from a friendly kind of deal to all of a sudden that we have a activist shareholder, which is Carl. Carl is a very interesting man. I spent a lot of time with him.
How did he get into the company in the first place?
Oh, I mean, he does research. He is looking for value company, right?
From stocks or private deals?
No. He accumulated a lot of, actually bought options to the shares. They will accumulate up to like 9% or whatever percentage that you don't have to report publicly.
So you couldn't see that?
You couldn't see, right. Yeah. So then he accumulated to a position, and then he'll call me and say, well, I just want to let you know, I'm now one of your biggest shareholders. We need to have a talk. Well, actually, he does it on TV publicly. So you wake up in the morning and say, oh, I'm on TV. And he announces,
really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that was an interesting day for you.
Carl has a style, Carl's terrific, you know, so there's something to learn, right? So as an entrepreneur, I never went through that process before. Few actually have. We were actually his first. We were the company that he bought shares and rattled the company before he did Yahoo. Yahoo was the next one. Because it's risky, right? Because these companies can recover and grow and the stock price can jump very fast. So this is a new field for him. Right? Historically, he went after like much older company that's much more established, much slower growth. These are very different kind of companies. That kind of helped the cause for Oracle to say, but back then we don't have like 2 classes of shares. So you have a staggered board, but all you need is just kind of get the first generation of the first round of the directors off the board. They can start putting people on the board and they can start rocking the boat. So that was kind of the intent. I think Oracle also get tired of us, not coming to a deal. So the deal became hostile. Once it became hostile, it's a very different kind of deal.
It became hostile because Carl Icahn was buying.
Not just because of Carl, because Carl obviously wanted to see an exit. He's only there to make money.
Was pushing the board?
Well, she's pushing the board, no doubt, pushing me. And then Larry wanted to buy the company. He will get impatient. So he's pushing it away. So a hostile bid will allow you to do this basically completely in the open. And they have done one before. They did a company called PeopleSoft, which they acquired through a hostile acquisition. Now we're in the marketplace. Now think about the timing, right? So this is now in late 2007. Now you have Carl, which our industry have not seen. Now you have a friendly bid become a hostile bid. And in the background, I was still very friendly with Larry as a friend. And then you have 6 quarters, you didn't report any earnings. And so now you're looking for sensational growth in the business. And then the financial crisis came. Our number one vertical was banking. Okay.
So you were happy to sell in the specific amount?
So Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns were big customers that were using a lot of our technology for trading, for many things.
So you lost a huge customer.
Well, we lost customer. So then when you take a company public, this wasn't my company. This is the shareholders' company. I think people really have to remind themselves, when you take a company public, it's the public's company. It's not the CEO's company. It's not the founder's company. So then I have to do what is in the best interest for those shareholders. When you see the world could have completely collapsed, which we thought as it was coming, was getting worse and worse and worse. And we thought if the banking system collapsed, we could be basically back in the Great Depression.
So you accepted the bid?
I accepted the bid. I tried to optimize the price, and I thought Oracle at the time they paid up. It was under $9 billion, which is second biggest deal Oracle ever did. It's in the top 3 deals in software. So I thought it was something I needed to do. I thought it was the right decision for the shareholder. As much as I love the company and love the people, I still miss them every day. My job wasn't to do that. My job was to, number one, is think about shareholders.
Quindi, da un lato Alfred pensa che se non avesse venduto BEA, ad oggi sarebbe potuta essere una $1 trillion company. Però in quella specifica situazione le incertezze erano tante e quindi ha deciso di vendere, cedendo alle pressioni di Oracle e di Carl Icahn e ai timori dovuti alla crisi del 2008. Questo comunque gli è garantito di fare un exit da 9 miliardi, di cui, secondo quello che ha detto, ben 7 sono tornati ai primissimi investitori. E quindi suppongo che tra 1 e 2 miliardi siano stati divisi tra gli azionisti, il team originale e i fondatori. Mica noccioline.
You were in the time probably in the center of the world, many things happening. Things that right now are in documentaries and movies. A crazy time to be in. After that, it's like the peace. How did you react?
I think I underestimated those kind of shocks. First, I was very young. I was about 40 years old when this happened. When you're at that kind of age, normal people are just about to enter into the prime of their career. So mine already, the one chapter was closed. I think I rushed into trying to do another new thing. I tried to do many things to fill the void of how my life was, which is kind of crazy. I was on the road all the time, and I have access to almost every CEO on the planet, and BEA was top 3 or 4 largest software companies. I was trying to fill the void. Now my advice to people that when this happened to them is really try to take at least 1 year off. I didn't do that. I really should have done that. It's not that I didn't have other passion. You walk in, I'm really into cars, I'm into racing. I should have really gone off to do that full time for a year. I didn't do that. I wanted to fill that void. I restarted that too early. The first couple, 3 years was a tough journey for me to kind of find a new purpose of life.
Quindi Alfred, tornando indietro, si prenderebbe quantomeno un sabbatico dopo l'exit, concentrandosi sulle sue passioni, come per esempio gli hobby fuori dal lavoro. Inoltre, a posteriori ha capito che anche quando si lavora ha senso avere un hobby, per evitare di andare in burnout.
You can get burnt out, by the way. People don't know when you get burnt out. You have no idea that it happens to you. I did, okay? It happened to me. I didn't know that.
It happened right after?
Actually, before. If you don't have someone on the side telling you, say, hey, stop, you're doing too much, okay? I love to work. I genuinely love it. I mean, if you ask me, what do I love the most? I can't wait to get up in the morning and get back to be doing work. I will always tell our CEOs, I say, find something that's good to distract yourself. So when you're working, you have to find a way to take the edge off. Get a hobby. Some people like to paint. Some people like to play music. For me, I love to collect model cars, love stuff with cars. Something that will allow you at all times to always take that 10-15% edge off of you. So you always have a reserve. Your mind is thinking about more broadly of things. It's actually good for the business.
Your life changed, right? You made also a little bit of money during the acquisition. How did you adjust also to that? Did your lifestyle change?
It didn't, because I think I've already been at it for a long period of time. There was no need for me to drastically change my life and start to do dangerous, rich people stuff. I was taught in a family where you have to really ground yourself all the time and not get those kind of things affect you. Because at core, what you are, you always have to retain that. Otherwise, then you become somebody else. That's how when people get lost and they start getting into big trouble. They do drugs. The way you don't do that is you're going to have some core belief who you are and what you're about. Yeah.
And how did you transition to risk capital?
A very natural thing to get very engaged in Silicon Valley if you're not directly running a company is helping other people. So the process of helping other people mostly is through advising and then also investing. So this whole concept of the angel investor concept is monumentally big here. This is a lifeline for how startups get going. Startup, they don't go to people, come to a firm like this in the beginning. They go to find their advisors, people they have been talking to or people they work for before. They mentor them and they give them $50,000, $100,000, and you collectively get a few $100,000 or $1 million. You get the company off the ground. Then you raise money from the venture capital. This is a very typical process. So I was the same. I was a big angel. I invested in over a decade, about close to 200 companies.
What's the biggest success?
Many big success. I had marketing hardcore tech company that were heavily used for analyzing how people were doing marketing online. It's a unicorn. Databricks, which is a hugely successful company. So I did a bunch of various things that became very successful. It's not my credit. It's really the founders were so exceptional. So I spent time and coached them. You want to go confide with someone that understands your pain. So I've been through this process. One thing led to another. That's how I built a reputation for being an angel that a CEO, a founder can go confide with. So I was only funding technical founders. Someone actually responsible for building the product they founded the company. So they were about to go through my whole journey.
Negli anni Alfred ha fatto il naturale passaggio di tutti i founder di successo della Silicon Valley. È diventato un angel investor e un advisor. advisor. Con il tempo però le aziende in cui investiva sono diventate sempre di più, per cui ha deciso di dare struttura alla sua attività e di fondare un vero e proprio venture capital, chiamato appunto Raise Capital.
First, it's a pretty exhaustive process because many people come to me. So now, which one do you spend more time with? Because it's not systematic, right? So it's not a structured business. It wasn't a business. It's more like a hobby, but except it's become a very big hobby. Expensive, big hobby, but lots of fun. I just thought, well, I have to be more selective. Ideally, I like to pick 10, 20 that I spend the most time with. And then in proportion, the percentage ownership has to go higher to justify that. And because then it goes both ways. Then also from a kind of governance perspective, it makes sense for you to be more involved. So I've been toying for some time and said, well, maybe I create a firm. And culturally, in Silicon Valley is very interesting. You go to angels for one thing. You go to the VC for another thing. That other thing means sometimes governance board seats, sometimes elasticity of how long they invest. And these people become specialists that you're now on the same team with them. That also means it has to be real. A VC means we have money behind us, so we have our own governance. So when we invest in them, everything go through that chain of command. So then you need a firm, you need a vehicle. And then so Raise Capital got started in 2019 for that reason, was to make this into a business itself. And it worked. I have an office. I come to the office, first thing in the morning. I am traveling to go see the companies, helping them on the deal. It became a business. I have already been leading 8 years before founding Raise Capital. I was already heavily investing in the big data. So why do you invest in big data? There's only two reasons. Either you use it for analytics or you use it to learn. And obviously, I didn't have the foresight in 2019 that the world is going to turn into the AI world that we are today, which is through a neural network and a large language. But for sure, rule-based machine learning was already ingrained. Everything that we did before with data and machine learning now make perfect sense. If you walked around in this Palo Alto neighborhood, many people will say, we are an AI infrastructure investor. We really are an AI infrastructure investor. We don't know how to do anything else. The speed of how we innovate is so fast. I mean, that's a very unique thing about this business. The business we're in, you can see one generation of technology come, go, reinvent it. You still are in it. You go through the reinvention. It dies again and get reinvented again. No other industry that I see, whether it's in transportation, it's in medical, have this level.
Generations to see that.
We're very lucky people. You live basically 6 lifetimes.
What about the next lifetime? So you saw internet from zero to everything, and we are gonna see AI from zero to everything. The billion-dollar question is how it's gonna deploy, you know? Which way, where to invest.
I view the training business of the large model itself is almost a fait accompli because I think we have seen what happened to search. So whoever has access to the biggest amount of data will likely be able to be successful in training the foundation model. And it's costly, right? So right now, until we see the GPU prices goes down, this is $1 billion a year exercise. You only have large companies that participate in it. It makes sense. The Google, the Meta, the Microsoft, OpenAI, and that's likely is going to be maybe one independent player at best. Those will be the survivors. And you need a huge amount of capital to continue to be in that business. The much more interesting thing to play will be the fetch part of it. Once you have the foundation model, you may need some specialty things that like data that I cannot share publicly when I train them. Those will be very important and unique. So let's say I'm a bank and I wanted to serve my customers, or maybe I even create a product I want to reach out to the customer and sell to them. Those are very proprietary to the person. So the bank has a responsibility to make sure that anything about them is kept privately. So those type of training and those type of fetching, even the fetching for the public data, is extraordinarily critical for the future of enterprise applications. There will be no enterprise application that would not be rewritten going forward. Everyone would. Whether it's SaaS package or homegrown application, you cannot afford not to have a neural network inside. That process will require many tools that we don't have today. Development tool, security tool. Now remember, 3 things are most important to these companies. Is the sovereignty of the data, is compliance, and security. We need tools to be able to do that to safeguard the customer's property, which is their data. So this stack, the middleware, for developing Gen AI application in the enterprise. So we are heavily focusing on this thesis to make this happen.
Quindi sulle AI la visione di Alfred è chiara. Un po' come con internet non si è occupato di costruire i computer né di fare programmi, ma ha creato l'interfaccia che permetteva all'azienda di usare internet, anche con l'AI non vede l'opportunità nella costruzione dei modelli, che ormai è appannaggio solamente delle solite aziende come OpenAI, Microsoft e Google, ma vede l'opportunità nell'aiutare le aziende a creare infrastrutture per usare i modelli internamente in maniera sicura. Questo perché le aziende hanno necessità specifiche sempre diverse e spesso sono anche molto regolamentate, quindi bisogna stare attenti.
Right now is the Far West on how these people access to data. We're probably going to see regulation about that. What do you think about that?
There's a lot of debate here about what you regulate, what you don't regulate. In general, I lean much more on less regulations is better for innovation. I think we're mixing 2 things. One is regulating, one is safety. Because the way that our most popular models are trained today, they don't know how to stop. So safety is a very important thing. Now, regulating who can do what to who is a whole different business. So when it becomes a safety issue, you may have to regulate. I think I lean on much more of don't over-regulate things that will ultimately prohibit us from innovating at this very important moment. This is a moment where we're about to have childbirth. The child's not born yet. It's right there. Ended up, you can either kill the baby or you can allow the baby to be a healthy baby and grow up to be very, very useful to the society. That's kind of how I see it.
Tra i progetti in cui è investito non troviamo solamente AI, ma anche cripto. Tra cui ho visto anche il progetto Solana, che è una delle cripto più popolari al momento. Per cui ho chiesto cosa ne pensasse del mondo cripto.
What do you think about the future of crypto?
You know how we actually ended up getting interested in Web3, not just crypto alone, was because of this whole thought process about edge computing. Because historically, look at the cloud, right? The cloud, because of efficiency and cost, is dominated by 2 or 3 players. It's very centralized. Imagine a fully distributed computing world. And the other thing is, you just look at the reality is, we have a lot of idle resources, whether it's disk or it's actually compute. Most of our desktops are idle, most of our phones are idle, but we have no way to reclaim them when it's not doing anything. And how many computers are burning off energy, expensive energy and valuable energy? They don't do nothing but sitting there. I think that you have to really think like Web3. The concept is it allowed that to be proliferated and validated completely in a fully decentralized fashion.
Anche qua la visione di Chuang è coerente con il suo passato. I server distribuiti sono stati la sua vita, quindi per lui è ovvio immaginare un mondo dove il computing è completamente distribuito e non in mano alle solite aziende, ma è decentralizzato su tutti i dispositivi, che come dice spesso sono inutilizzati e consumano energia. E ovviamente la tecnologia come la blockchain in questo caso può aiutare, anche se per ora il mondo cripto non si è mosso nella direzione che lui voleva.
I think that journey was disrupted because of greed. We had a blow up in 2022 that was somewhat almost unnecessary other than greed kicked in. I always talk about the whole concept of incentivizing people that uses your API and code with a token makes perfect sense. Why would a developer keep using your stuff? They should be sharing a piece of the action when the underpinning technology becomes successful because they help proliferate it. It got misused. So I think this is one area where some rules of engagement would be nice, and which I think this round 2, round 3 of crypto hopefully will have more of that in place. I still believe in it, but I'm only investing in infrastructure level type stuff. Layer 1 makes sense, some layer 2 makes sense. They make sense to me, right? Why not here invest in some random protocol to try to make money? That wouldn't make sense for us.
Stupid coins.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Questa conversazione con Alfred è stata illuminante. Lo dico sempre, lo dico ogni volta, però quest'anno non mi sarei mai immaginato di fare una conversazione di questo livello. Sono le persone come Alfred Chuang che hanno fatto la storia della Silicon Valley e per cui le cose che utilizziamo tutti i giorni funzionano in questo modo. Per cui è stato un onore fare questa chiacchierata. Se volete vedere altre chiacchierate così, iscrivetevi al canale e non perdetevi neanche le vecchie chiacchierate che ho fatto.